The air was cold in April 1981. It was quiet in the mountains of Keddie, California. A small resort town, a place for getting away, but something terrible happened there. It was a weekend, spring was just starting. Then everything changed. Cabin 28. It was a small place, a family lived there. Sue Sharp lived there with her kids. Her sons John and Rick, her daughters Tina, Sheila, and Justin. Wait, Justin was a boy. People often talk about the little girl who witnessed, but really it was the young children, Justin and Rick, who were in the cabin. Especially Justin. His memories later became so important. On April 12, 1981, Sheila Sharp came home. She was the oldest daughter, still living at the cabin. She had stayed over at a friend's place. She walked into cabin 28 that morning. What she saw was awful. It was something no one should ever see. Her mother, Sue Sharp, was dead, tied up, her throat cut. Her brother, John Sharp, was dead, tied up, stabbed many times. John's friend, Dana Wingate, was also dead, tied up, beaten. All three were killed in the living room. It was a scene of pure horror. And then there was Tina. Tina Sharp was 12 years old. She was not there. She was missing. In another room, 2 other children were asleep. Justin Sharp was 5 years old. Rick Sharp was 10 years old. They were unharmed. They were in a separate bedroom. They had slept through all of it. Or did they? That's where the big questions start. That's where the suppressed testimony comes in. Sheila ran out of the cabin. She got help. The police came. The nightmare began for everyone involved, and for the police, a hard case was just starting. A case that would stay unsolved for a very long time. Right away, the investigation seemed off. The scene was not handled well. It was a small town. Maybe the police there were not ready for something so brutal. People walked all over the crime scene. Evidence might have been lost. Things were moved. It was not how a big murder investigation should start. And then there were the children. Well, Rick and Justin were in that cabin. They were young. They were scared. They had just woken up to find their mother, brother, and a friend dead. Their sister Tina was gone. Imagine that. Imagine being 5 years old or 10 and living through that. These boys were potential witnesses. They were right there. But their experiences, their words, seemed to get pushed aside. People often wonder why. Why did the police not listen more closely to them? Why did their stories get ignored, or at least not taken as seriously as they should have been? Let's talk about Justin. He was just 5. At that age, a child processes things differently. They might not have the words to say what they saw, they might block it out. They might get things mixed up. This is a common problem with child witnesses. In 1981, people knew even less about how to talk to kids after trauma. Police in those days often thought children were not reliable. They believed kids made things up, or that their memories were too fragile, or that they could be easily influenced. It was a different time. There wasn't the kind of specialized training we have now for interviewing child victims or witnesses. They didn't have special protocols. They didn't have child psychologists often involved right away. So when Rick and Justin were found, they were taken out of the cabin, they were questioned. But it was not deep questioning. It was probably rushed. The police were focused on the dead bodies. They were focused on finding Tina. They were looking for the killers. Justin, being so young, might not have said much at first. Or what he said might not have made sense to the adults. Imagine a 5-year-old trying to describe something so terrible. He might have used child language, he might have been too scared to speak clearly. Or he might have just been shut down by the shock. Rick, at 10, was older. But he too was a child. He was confused. He was traumatized. He was also asleep in the cabin during the murders. He and Justin were in the same bedroom, so if anyone heard anything, it would be them. Years later, Justin's memories started to come back. This is where the idea of suppressed testimony really takes hold. As an adult, Justin started to remember things from that night. Horrible things. He remembered men in the cabin. He remembered sounds. He remembered people being tied up. He remembered seeing his mother. He recalled seeing his mother, Sue, and her friend Marty Smartt in the living room. Marty Smartt was a neighbor. He was sometimes a friend, sometimes more than that to Sue. He was in the cabin often. He was one of the first suspects. Justin remembered Marty with another man. This other man was later identified as Boubede. Bo was an ex-con, a rough guy. He was staying with Marty at the resort. Justin's later memories were vivid. He remembered seeing his mother tied up. He remembered Marty and Bo being there. He remembered a hammer. He remembered a struggle. He remembered Tina screaming. These were not small details. These were big, important things. If he had said these things early on, it would have changed everything. But he didn't say them then. Or if he did, they weren't heard. They weren't recorded properly. They weren't given the weight they deserved. Why? One big reason is that police often look for clear, consistent statements. They want adults to tell them what happened. When a child speaks in fragments, or in a way that seems confused, it's easy for an investigator to dismiss it. They might think the child is confused, or dreaming, or just trying to make sense of a bad situation. Another reason could be the way the police were trained back then. They might have been taught to focus on physical evidence. They might have been taught to interview adults in a certain way. They weren't necessarily equipped to handle a deeply traumatized child. They might have seen it as too difficult. They might have thought they would just confuse the child more. Or maybe they just didn't see the value in what a young child could say. There's also the element of protecting the child. An investigator might not want to put a young child through repeated, intense questioning. They might think it's better for the child's mental health to let them move on. This is a kind intention, but it can also mean crucial information gets missed. And in Keddie, this might have been part of it. No one wanted to hurt Justin or Rick more than they already were. But in doing so, they might have let important clues slip away. Then we have the broader problems of the Keddie investigation itself. It was flawed from the start. The crime scene was a mess. Important evidence was lost, or it was not collected. A tape from the scene went missing. The overall handling of the case was poor. When the foundation of an investigation is shaky, everything built on it becomes shaky too. So, if the basic procedures were not followed, it's not a stretch to think that the child interviews were also not handled with the care they needed. Some theories go even darker. There are whispers of local corruption. Some people believe that someone in power, or connected to power, might have been involved. Or that there was a deliberate cover-up. If this were true, then any testimony, especially from a child, that pointed in a certain direction might have been actively suppressed. It might have been ignored on purpose. This is a serious accusation, but it's part of the lore surrounding Keddie. It comes from the strange way the case unfolded and how some leads just went cold. Justin's later memories, when he finally spoke about them, pointed fingers. They pointed towards Marty Smartt and Boubede. These men were suspects from early on, but the police didn't seem to pursue them hard enough. They focused on other people. Or they just couldn't make the case stick. If Justin's testimony was ignored, it means a huge piece of the puzzle was missing from the official investigation. It means the police weren't getting the full picture. The impact of ignoring the children was huge. It meant lost time. It meant missed opportunities. It meant that the people who knew the most, the ones who were right there, weren't truly heard. The case dragged on for decades. Tina's remains were found years later, miles away. But the killers were never brought to justice, and a big part of that failure might be traced back to how the earliest witnesses, the most vulnerable ones, were treated. Justin's story came out much later. It got attention from cold case investigators. People working on the case years later looked at it with fresh eyes. They had more modern training. They understood child trauma better. They saw the value in what Justin was saying. But by then, decades had passed. Memories fade. People die. Evidence disappears. It becomes so much harder to prove anything. Imagine being Justin, carrying those memories, not being able to speak about them, or speaking and not being heard. That's a heavy burden. And it's a failure of the system, a failure to protect, a failure to investigate. The Keddie murders show how important every witness is, no matter how young. No matter how traumatized, every piece of information matters. And when you ignore someone, especially a child who was present, you lose a chance. You lose a chance at justice. You lose a chance at truth. The police had a tough job that day in 1981. It was a horrifying scene. They were probably overwhelmed, but the way they handled the children, or failed to handle them, stands out as a critical flaw. It's a flaw that might have stopped the case from ever being solved. It's a flaw that leaves a dark stain on the investigation. The story of the little girl who witnessed, or more accurately, the children who witnessed, is a sad one. It's a reminder that we need to listen to everyone, especially the most vulnerable among us. Their voices might hold the key. And when those voices are ignored, it can lead to a lifetime of unanswered questions. It can lead to justice being denied, and that's exactly what happened in Keddie. The horror of that night was compounded by the silence that followed, a silence that might have been broken, if only someone had truly listened.